So today we're talking about, well, what is essentially the theme really for our current Tory government, and that is essentially to deny the complete reality of the things with Brexit just aren't going as well as they hoped or even wanted to. Indeed, we have not seen any economic assessments plans from this government, which should be and certainly is incredibly worrying. Because, as we've said before, most of these people, they know what the damage is going to be. Even moderate Tories who, again, want to be in power but then actually speak out because, they know that their chances are pretty much predicated on there being an economy. Because one of the untrue untruths we have in this country, the idea that Labour spends all the money and yet it is somehow the Conservatives who are left to clean it up. That is absolutely 100% untrue. The Conservatives, through austerity, have ballooned our national debt to untold numbers that we've never seen before under a Labour government. Not only that, but every time we are go, can we have money for this? Can we have money for that? We are told that there is no money, but when it comes to handing out money to their friends, there is ample money. So you've got to have some sort of smokescreen. You've got to have something to keep the punters happy. You've got to have bread and circus. And one of the best bread and circus shows in town currently at the moment is the constant, quote, battle being waged against the dreaded EU. And we are going to see this pretty much probably for quite some time to come. And as I've said, whenever they want to blame the EU now, it makes them look absolutely ridiculous. We've already got the EU looking at ratifying the deal. And there's a chance that they might not ratify it, but there's a chance they always might do. We'll just have to see. But again, there has been this, it is just a smokescreen to cover the other worser things that are happening in this country. So today we're going to get into that because it is just absolutely ridiculous. So before we do get into that, please do remember to hit that like and share button. Also down below there is links to my Patreon page, as well as a one-off donation link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can, buy me a coffee. And thank you to all those people who do support the channel that way. So on with today's article, and this comes from The Guardian. And the title is, Brexit is a machine to generate perpetual grievance. It's doing its job perfectly. And if you remember, we've had this perpetual grievance generated by the Brexiteer Tories constantly for years. And now they just can't let it go. So anyway, Brexit has changed everything about Britain's relationship with the European Union. And also nothing. For anyone trying to do business across borders newly gummed up with bureaucracy, the comparison is stark and painful. But in politics, an old pattern is playing out. A cycle of suspicion and self-sabotage that began long before the 2016 referendum. It starts with the belief that Britain does not depend on its neighbours for trade or anything else. And like I say, that is a dangerous belief. It's a stupid belief because it's just painfully not true. But unfortunately, this is a belief that permeates not only our political culture, especially by right-wing Tories, but also is the national fantasy. It all builds into Britain, quote, stood alone. So anyway, it continues. That leads to the neglect of diplomacy required to make partnerships work. Going against the grain of economics and geography escalates every negotiation into a test of national self-esteem. This adjustment for reality is recentered as a surrender of sovereignty. Euroscepticism is a machine generating for perpetual grievance. It works by making Brussels the enemy, spoiling relationship and serving up the sour mood to a domestic audience as proof that the other side just does not want to be friends. Brexit has dismantled the institutional platform on which that drama used to be played, but that does not change the economic and strategic dynamics. The UK still needs things from Brussels, but it has lost the leverage that it had from a seat at the EU summit table. This makes it harder for Boris Johnson to play the old double game of public belligerence and private compromise. On that score, EU membership was always the way previous prime ministers used to have their cake and eat it. Johnson has no interest in the practical side of European diplomacy. His 2019 promise to, quote, get Brexit done, expressed a personal preference for changing the subject of British politics, a preference that chimed with the entire public mood. Since Johnson only applies his brain to things when he can no longer hide from them, not talking about the EU-UK relationship allows him also to stop thinking about them. For that task has been now outsourced to David Frost, and we've already talked about that this week as well. Formerly the chief Brexit negotiator, now the UK chair of the Partnership Council that oversees the implementation of the EU deal. Frost was given a peerage last year, and with his new role comes a seat at the cabinet. His rapid evolution was propelled by dogmatic Euroscepticism and personal devotion to the Prime Minister. He is a true believer in the cult of sovereignty. He was converted to the faith when his career in the Foreign Office completely stalled, then made completely zealotous by the pursuit of an alternative career, clinging to Johnson's coattails. Nowhere does his record speak of subtlety or for creative diplomacy. Frost appointment is not a malicious provocation, but the typical act of a Johnson negligence. The Prime Minister likes to delegate the many aspects of leadership that bore him, but he trusts very few people because he presumes his own tendency for deceit and betrayal is the norm. He needs someone like Frost who will obediently try and mop up the grief spilling out of his leaky, rickety EU deal. And tension is already high over the Northern Ireland Protocol, which creates a customs border in the Irish Sea. The mere existence of this trade barrier has infuriated unionists, even before the full cost is felt. A grace period of waiving some checks expires at the end of March, and the UK has demanded an extension on the terms of the amount of that amounts to major renegotiation. The European Commission responded that Britain must honour the treaty it signed, and also that Brexit was, quote, done. It turns out is not to be true. So, were it not for the pandemic, loose ends and lost jobs would be making more headlines. Whether they would also be changing public opinion is also a different question. Some enthusiasm is surely dropping into the chasm between Brexit as a liberation theology, as is this real-world incarnation of rotting fish unveiled to the Calais market. But British political culture contains deep reserves of stoic resignation to adversity, especially other people's adversity. There is no simple road back, no better deal on the table, and that it is not easy for ministers to spin the pain mandated by their deal as aggression by vengeful Europeans. Leavers will be attracted to that story because it spares them the discomfort of admitting that they voted for a con and that they made a prime minister a con artist. Keir Starmer will not fight on that terrain, since doing so gets him no affection in the constituencies that were lost to Labour in the 2019. Thus, in England at least, the folly of Brexit is being buried for excavation at some later time in the future, perhaps by a completely different political generation. It might happen sooner, but I suspect any shift in opinion on the EU will come only at a consequence of some wide collapse in Johnson's personal standing. He is in the denial. He is the very denial that people elected. And for many voters, disillusionment with Brexit is downstream of disappointment with the whole Boris shtick in the flow of political events. Meanwhile, there will be endless negotiations, largely unreported except when they escalate into rows, at which point the rusty old template will be applied. Plucky Britain standing up to bullying Brussels. It is the story the Eurosceptics used to tell when the UK was an EU member. But more poignant because the 27 against 1 dynamic that was the paranoid myth has now become fact. Over time, that dynamic will make it even harder for the opposition to express a pro-European position without inviting the charge of siding with the enemy. It is frustrating for Remainers who still crave the moment of vindication, when the fraud is proved beyond doubt and the tide of opinion turns. But for that to happen, Brexit would have to be measured in terms of trade and diplomacy, and those are not levers metrics. They long ago swapped the economic argument for cultural war bluster. There is no defence for Johnson's deal if the ambition was a serious advancement of the national interest, but there is another test, and it is one that it matters most to the architects of Brexit, although they never admit it, even to themselves. For the true believers, a good Brexit is one that keeps the grievance alive. That makes the foreigners the scapegoats for bad governance. That continues to indulge in the twin national myths of victimhood and historic defiance. Measures for that purpose, and Johnson's pointless Brexit is completely perfect for it. And that's really what I've been saying all this time, that it is just going to be a perpetual grievance machine. And, you know, the two national lies we like to tell ourselves of being picked on by the EU and that we are, you know, national defiance. It sums up the attitudes for Brexit perfectly. And here's the thing. The Brexiteers have abandoned that argument. It wasn't even really discussed at the 2016 referendum. It was just battered about as, oh, you don't believe in Britain. When the economic argument came up, that was just the response. You don't believe in Britain. And it's still used now. So even though it is going to damage our economy and damage our diplomatic actions, because as we've said before, global trade flows do not change, neither does geography. Europe is still going to be our closest, best trading partner. That hasn't changed now because of Brexit, and it's not going to change in 10 years. And we're going to have to hammer that home. Even when they start using the Brexit war mantra against us, we're just going to have to hammer that home and start calling it out that they do not have answers to these questions. And when they go, oh, we'll simply do a trade deal with, you know, the emerging markets. What do these emerging markets want from us? It's pointless, because here's the thing. We are an advanced economy. Very often, our products that we sell are what we call top-level finished goods. The emerging economies do not want those types of goods. They want to sell us the resources that make those types of goods, but not those finished resources. Indeed, out of the top economies that are classed as advanced economies, the vast majority of them are in the EU. You've only got America, Canada, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand, and Israel that are basically not in that advanced economy class. And even then, we were already trading with them under EU rules. So once again, Brexit doesn't make sense. You know, the economic argument has never, ever been there for Brexit. So, as always, thank you for watching. Please do remember to hit that like and share button on your way out. And of course, down below, there is a link to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can, well, buy me a coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all the people who do support me and the channel that way. And as always, we'll see you all next time.